Oh no, what a disappointment. One tomato set on this whole truss. Are you having trouble with your tomato plant setting fruit? If so, try this. G'day, I'm Mark from Self-Sufficient Me, and in this video I'm going to explain the main reasons why tomato plants don't set fruit and what we can do about it. Let's get into it. Before we get into this electric toothbrush trick, let's go through some of the reasons why tomatoes may not set on your tomato plant. This is a really good example. You can see no fruit set here, one on the end, but on the very next plant, they're all set. Beautiful, coming along nicely. So why is that? Well, the first thing is different varieties of plant. This tomato here is a Thai pink egg, and they're renowned for setting fruit really easily and setting a lot of fruit. Whereas this one here is a lesser known variety called a black truffle, and it obviously finds it harder to set fruit because you can look up this plant and only a few fruit is setting on these trusses. So this is a good plant for me to demonstrate on how I can help improve production. And along with the variety, some varieties of tomato plants don't do as well as others in cooler weather. Under cooler conditions, pollen isn't as active either. Pollen seems to be a bit more cluggy, especially on tomatoes, and you can notice this if you've ever had cat face on a tomato. It's not a disease, it's the pollen not fertilizing the plant correctly because the weather's just a bit too cold, and because of that improper pollination or fertilization, the tomato becomes deformed. In fact, most tomatoes won't do as good in a cooler climate or at the cooler times of the year. At the moment, we're in our subtropical winter, and it still does get quite cold, and it's a little too cold for tomatoes. But the reason why I'm growing them at this time of year is because of two. Firstly, it escapes the hot, humid conditions through our spring or late spring and summers, where our tomatoes can get easily diseased through the hot, humid weather. And the second reason is there's less pests at this time of year. The other fact, especially during winter time, is the lack of pollinators like bees, hoverflies and other insects that pollinate tomato flowers. Through winter time, there's not many of them around, or not as many as usual. And if you've got a lot of tomato flowers to pollinate, it can be really hard for one or two bees to find them and get stuck in and do their business. And winter in this case, or cooler weather, isn't the only reason why you might find a lack of pollinators. It could be as simple as there aren't many around. You could be in a desert environment, or just in an environment where there isn't a lot of bees or other pollinators to pollinate your tomato plants. That can happen. You could be in an urban environment, or in a high rise, or on a balcony in the inner city where there aren't many bees around. It could be due to the equipment you've got. Greenhouses or polytunnels. You might be protecting your tomatoes from other pests like caterpillars or birds or even fruit fly. And if that's the case, you could be excluding inadvertently bees and other pollinating insects. Indoor farms in particular, they will have their own bees to pollinate their tomato crops. One thing you can do if you're lacking pollinators in your garden is attract them in using other plants. Tomato flowers aren't the best attractant for pollinators like bees. Of course, bees love tomato flowers, and especially if they're the only one around. But what really does attract them are plants like this fantastic specimen here, this Thai basil. The native bees and the honeybees are swarming all over this fella. And what it does is it will attract bees to the garden from miles away, and when they're attracted to this, they'll also branch out and hit the tomato plant flowers as well. Just look at these beauties. You're not going to get tomatoes like this, or maybe none set at all, if your plant is under stress. So stress can be another large factor. If your plant is not getting enough water, if it's going through a really dry spell, or even if it's not getting enough food, enough nutrients, fertilizer, what can happen is your tomato plant will go into protection mode. It won't set fruit, or it'll drop flowers, so that it can maintain its strength, it can keep growing and surviving, and then it'll wait for a later time when hopefully conditions pick up, and then it'll start setting fruit. So even if the flowers are getting pollinated, it might throw the flowers anyway, and then you still won't get fruit. So that's another consideration. Is the tomato plant thriving, or is it under stress? Having mentioned all those factors of why your tomato plants may not set fruit, tomato plants really are one of the easiest plants to set fruit. In fact, even the wind itself, and there's plenty of that today, unfortunately, when I'm trying to film, but even the wind itself can pollinate tomatoes. They're self-pollinating. Replicating the wind and shaking tomato trusses and the flowers can work also. So too can a flick. Just flicking the end or flicking the base of the flowers, not too hard, but just a little flick like that can work wonders and pollinate those flowers, turning them into tomatoes. Talking to a tomato plant probably won't work, but it could make you feel better. How are you doing? But by far the easiest and best and most natural way to get success like this is through bees. In some cases, the buzz can activate the flower and trigger it to throw pollen into the air, so that some lands on the stigma, finding its way down to the ovary where the tomato fruit forms. And a great way to replicate or mimic the action of buzzing bees on tomato flowers is to use an electric toothbrush like this. I wouldn't use your own. I mean, you can, but it's a bit yucky. Probably best if you snuck a family member's toothbrush out. They'll never know. Or you can just go and buy one and use it specifically for gardening. All right, watch now for a complete demonstration on how to fertilise a tomato flower with an electric toothbrush. Oh, it's flat. That happens to me all the time. How come no one ever puts it back on the... I'm only joking. Whack him on, and then all you need to do is go underneath the back of the flower there, or even around, doesn't matter. And any flowers that are open in particular, because that's the time for doing it, just buzz them. See the shaking there? Perfect. Does no harm to the flowers, but it vibrates that pollen and it replicates a bee. You can do that at the stem of the plant, and that can work. It can vibrate them all at once. If you're not finding you're getting enough vibration, then go right on the flower there like that. Just turn that off for a second. Yes, it can be a bit time consuming, but you can imagine it's worth it, because it can't be any worse than growing tomato plants for months on end, only for them to produce very little fruit because the flowers haven't been pollinated. So it really is worth getting out there and giving it a go. And this electric toothbrush method really does work a treat. And yes, I can already see it in the comments section already. And Mark, use an electric toothbrush on your tomato plants and they'll never ever get cavities. Ha ha. All right, go on, whack them down in the comments section, see how many funnies you can come up with. I'm sure there's plenty, and I'll enjoy reading them. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you give it a big thumbs up, and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye for now. I'm just doing it because it's fun.